Welcome to the Craft Beer Podcast. I'm Steven Shomler, your host. Really excited about today's episode. Have a returning guest. Absolutely love Andre Meunier. How you doing? Did I get your name right?
You get it right every time, Steven. Thank you, and it's great to be here again. Thanks for having me.
I'm always afraid I'm going to screw it up. So you are you're a beer writer for the Oregonian, which is really, really cool. I just think that is amazing. And then you're also a breaking news editor for the Oregonian. So you're a real live, full-time, in the flesh journalist.
I am. I've been doing this for over 3 decades as a journalist, and the beer writing part has been in the past 5 or 6 years. It's the more fun part. I do that in the afternoon, and I do my breaking news editing in the morning, where I and my crew of news reporters, if there's anything that's happened out in P-Town overnight, we get it onto Oregon Live, which is also, it's now the Oregonian Oregon Live. So, and people can get our content immediately online at Oregon Live. Boy, that sounded like a commercial, didn't it?
Hey, I think it's important that you talk about, because I think local news is important. We'll talk about that later. I think local news is important, and I think it's important people support it. But you mentioned how long you've been a writer and a beer writer, and as fate would have it, speaking of a commercial, we recorded a podcast last year where we told your story.
We did.
So the people, when they go look up that one, they can find out, how did you become a writer? How did you become a journalist? And it's a really fun story, so we told that. But this episode, you have been writing an end-of-year article each year, kind of how the year went. And 2020 was a rough year. And
let me think back on that. What happened in 2020, Steven? I don't think I can remember.
And for this episode is kind of the pandemic year in review. For me, emotionally and personally, the pandemic really started in March. I was literally in Greece and was sent home. They you got to get home by Friday, otherwise you won't look back in the country. It was kind of a scary time. And so it's March now. It's been about a pandemic year. But you wrote an amazing end-of-year article, which I'll also put a link to, talking about the year. So kind of cover the end of year 2020 and the end of the pandemic year, but where can people find your content?
Sure. Thanks, Stephen. My content is at OregonLive.com/beer. And if you go there, you click on one of my stories and click on my byline, will take you to link to every story I've ever written. So that's the easiest way to get all my stories.
And byline is the highlighted signature, your name highlighted.
By Andre Meunier.
Yeah, I like that. Okay, that's good. So as I mentioned, for me, the pandemic hit in March, and they're like, okay, and we're going to just be shut down for a little while. Everybody stay in your homes. I put on a good COVID 20 or 30 pounds during that time. For the first few weeks, it's like, well, let's have a martini every night. We can't leave the house, and we're just going to have a beer, have a martini every night instead of maybe once a week. And then for me, things got really real. By the time we got to middle of May, end of May, and we were still locked down, and that's still not on the horizon. For me, I was worried about the restaurants that I care for. I was worried about the breweries, and I was thinking a lot of them aren't going to make it. What was those first early days for you like? What was going on in your head?
Well, I wasn't anywhere near as exotic as Greece. I was in Arizona when it all happened at my in-laws with my wife, playing golf and going to spring training baseball and just having a nice time. And I came back, and 2 days later, everything shut down, and we were told we're working from home. And I thought, oh, well, I guess this is getting pretty serious. And made the conversion, set up a home office, and started trying to figure out how to do that. And at that time, everybody was thinking, and I remember talking to my buddies in a couple Zoom sessions at the get-go, being like, okay, well, is this just going to be like the flu or a cold, and it'll be over in a couple of weeks, a month or so? It can't go on longer than that, right? How long can this thing live? And everybody at that point, I remember, thought, we'll have this in hand by summer. Well, spring turned to summer turned to fall turned to winter, and here we are a year later. And I don't think there's anybody out there going, how did that happen? I thought this was going to get dealt with. I thought it was going to be short, but it wasn't. And there were various scenarios that people thought would happen, and it's been a year. In terms of the beer industry, when Governor Kate Brown shut down bars and restaurants pretty early in the pandemic, I think there was some panic. There was a lot of questions. What does this mean? What's going to happen? And staffs got laid off. Breweries, tap rooms were all quiet. And then things gradually started to change, and people started to figure out, okay, here's what I got to do now.
Yeah, and I had there's a couple breweries in Thessaloniki, Greece that I was going to interview on Saturday. I was going to go to the Hoppy Pub, which is an amazing craft beer pub in Thessaloniki.
I want to go there.
Oh yeah, it would be great. And you go and you can co-host an episode with me. That'd be fun. And those were all scheduled for Saturday, and I had to leave on Friday, and it was like, ugh.
That had to be heartbreaking.
Yeah, it was yucky. Speaking of heartbreaking, there's some people we lost, some breweries both, and this is not a comprehensive list, but there's some breweries that went out during the pandemic here in Portland and in other parts of Oregon, tell some of the ones that we lost.
Sure. I think the first one I can remember was Grixon Brewing in Southeast Portland, a place run by DJ Moxley, who was the head brewer, and his partners. It was such a beautiful tap room. It was one of my favorite tap rooms in Portland. Just these big, old industrial building that had high ceilings, beautiful metalwork in it, beautiful woodwork. They had one of the most amazing brown ales, I think, in Portland, and they were young. And I think they had some rent issues, some lease issues that I don't know the details of, and probably shouldn't get into. But I think they just couldn't swing it, and so they closed pretty early. That was followed by probably the next. Probably the biggest one in Portland was Base Camp Brewing.
Yeah.
Which closed temporarily in summer or spring, maybe still spring. Memory's getting a little foggy here after a COVID year. But and then I wrote an article a couple months ago that owner Justin Fay had decided to throw in the towel. He just couldn't make enough money. He lives down in Southern Oregon now. It was just too difficult. And so he has put Base Camp up for sale, whether it's turnkey or branding sale. And I haven't heard that he sold it yet, but I know he's trying to. But that was a tough one. Base Camp was really another beautiful spot. It was here in inner Southeast Portland. It had sort of I wrote in my profile when I profiled them years ago that you didn't know if you were in a tap room or an REI. The tap handles were all carabiners. The poles, they had a canoe hanging over the bar. They had all these beautiful outdoor pictures all over the walls. It was just a lovely space, and they had a stout that they served with a toasted marshmallow.
I loved it, and I'm shameless in plugging myself, but if you want the story of that canoe has a story, and it's in my second book, the story of that canoe. Yeah,
about how they found it in a wasn't it in a creek somewhere?
Well, they crashed it, yeah, and then brought it back up.
Yeah.
But yeah, so we also lost Backpedal, but they may come back. I don't know, but I don't want to. If somebody says they might, I want to be very sensitive and caring and say, okay, they say they might.
Yep, Backpedal says they might come back. I certainly hope they'll open. They're a great little alternative to that whole area with 10 Barrel and Von Ebert and Deschutes and some biggies over there, and you can pop in a little Backpedal and have a nice little beer.
Portland Brewing finally packed it in. Whether they really were Portland Brewing or Pyramid Brewing, that was kind of a branding challenge back and forth. Bless their hearts, but they're gone now.
Yeah, they're gone too. That's one of the old timers. Another one of the old timers has left the building, which has been tough with Bridgeport and Widmer was sold fully to AB last year. So a lot of the old timers in Portland no longer.
Yep, and then Ross Island. They've had some challenges. Love the beer, love the people, amazing people. For me, amazing beer, but COVID kind of did that in.
Yeah, Carson Haney's a great guy, and they had been sort of back and forth, and they're blended a little bit with the loss of Kex, which had come to Portland and opened up a new place, and they were brewing as they had taken over the Ross Island space, and were brewing Kex beer there, and he was still kind of doing Ross Island beer on the side, but ultimately that shut down, and Kex has shut down. Well, Kex, I don't know that Kex shut down permanently, but they have closed.
Yep.
So another one yet to be seen whether they come back.
And not a lot of Portland craft beer people went here, but it was a real live brewery, the Ram Clackamas.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, sort of flew under, very popular, but flew under the radar at the same time. So I don't know how those two things can exist together, but they do.
Well, they weren't part of the cool craft beer scene. They weren't the cool kids didn't go there. So
that's exactly right. It's a bit like Old Market Pub in Southwest Portland.
Yep.
Run by Andy and Shelley Bigley. It's a place that is popular as heck. You can never go there and not have it be crowded, but sort of doesn't really get the love that some of the cool beer kids in Portland do.
Yep. And then we lost. And then there were some breweries outside of the Portland area that we lost. Salem Ale Works was one of them.
Mm-hmm. Salem Ale Works, Three Sheets Brewing in Albany. Machoco Brewing in Prineville. What else was there? Oh, sort of one of my curious little favorites was Big Horse Brewing in Hood River.
Yep.
I would love to come off a day of skiing in the mountain and go to Big Horse, and they're up on the hill looking down at all the big boy breweries that came later. Big Horse was there first, but then you got Freem, you got Double Mountain, you got Ferment, all those Full Sail, of course. It was actually, Big Horse was there before Full Sail.
Wow.
Actually, by a couple months.
Wow. And then Flat Tail, although that maybe...
They're reopening in a new iteration.
Yep, which is good.
Yep, absolutely.
And then, man, breaks my heart, Bailey's and Upper Lip.
Just a gut punch, right?
Well said.
Bailey's was one of the first tap rooms to really kind of give you that place where you could go and get beers that you've never heard of, and a tap list that was diverse and covered a plethora of styles. Breweries you'd never heard of either. And when the first time I went to Bailey's, because the Oregonian downtown Portland, and I remember walking down Broadway and getting close to Burnside and be like, what is this place? And I hadn't heard of it. I wasn't writing about beer at that point. And I popped in there, and it was a little slice of Disneyland. It was just an amazing tap list. And then the Upper Lip was just icing on the cake.
Yeah, my son, Zach, he's a content creator to Strong Opinion Sports.
I watch that. That's good.
Yeah, I love him. He's great. And he's got a friend that works in film production, Max. And Max recently told Zach something that I took as a great compliment. He said that Max said that me, Steven, is his favorite old person.
You're only like 50 or something, aren't you?
And then he likes how I do social media. And I thought, okay, this is cool. This is cool because, you mentioned Bailey's, and I'm really glad that I did a podcast with them about them. And they're gone now, but I feel like now I've got like a piece of history, the people can go, what was it like back in the day? And now saying that out loud makes me feel old. I'm kind of glad. And I've got a small project on the side, Portland Dive Bars, and I write about dive bars, and it's been on hold for a long time. But I've got articles maybe about dive bars may not come back, but I think I'm going to publish those even if they don't, because it feels like I'm kind of commemorating history. Yeah.
I have that same sort of feel about Bridgeport Brewing, where when I first came to Portland in '98, it was just the old Bridgeport, where they had it was a pizza pub, and then they had a dock where you could go sit outside and have your pizza and your beer, and then they turned it into sort of a Pearl District place, and the charm was gone for me, and as for a lot of people. But that's my sort of nod to being a cool old guy history.
And then Thirsty Monk, they went out.
Yep, and they had some plans too. They were going to start brewing here. Thirsty Monk is a few places across the country where they brew and import beer. Not import, but bring beer from there. And they were going to start to brew here, so that's all done, unfortunately.
Well, here's what shocked me, though. When we got to the end of May, I was like, of 2020, I was like, oh my gosh, this is going to be bad. This is not good. I'm worried. And I was afraid that all the breweries we lost, my heart aches for them, because it's people put their blood, sweat, and tears to start.
Yeah.
And having a failure, I've had some failures in my life, and it is a horrible thing to go through. But I would have expected a lot more. I was afraid it was going to be way worse than it actually was.
The Brewers Association, I believe in April, you can look back at my story on this, surveyed breweries nationwide, and one half of them said if this pandemic shutdown went on for 3 months, they would be dead in the water. They would close shop. So at that point in April, everybody thought this is going to be a massacre. This is just going to be ugly, ugly, ugly. Well, that was April. May, June, July comes along. People are limping along. Businesses have figured out some new ways to do things. They're continuing to go, be a going concern. They made it through fall, and then that deep, dark, ugly winter when everybody just shuts down was looming ahead. Got through winter, and here we are now. But it's all because of adaptability and sort of bootstrap work ethic.
Yeah, tenacity, ingenuity. Those are things people realized, okay, this is the mess. Now what can we do with it?
Right.
And people fought hard, and they did some innovative things. One of the first ones on my radar, there was two that really they're doing something different, and they're going to make it. And I think they gave inspiration to others was Bearlick.
Yep.
They just started doing some things that at the time, now it's normal, but at the time was like, oh, this is kind of weird.
Speaking of canning lines, which I don't know that we were on the air, but I believe they added a canning line in the last year. Culmination is adding one. So that's one of the things that people have done too, is sort of pivot from, all right, we're sending our beer to the distributor, they're going to do whatever they're going to do with it, or we're sending kegs out to bars and we're selling at our tap. They started dealing directly with their customers, and one way to do that was get cans in hands.
Yeah, and deliver beer. Reverend Nat, he's cider, but he's part of the craft beer community.
He's part of that.
And I love Nat West, and he was delivering. He himself was early on out delivering cider. Bang the drum. Well, you want to be cider? I'll take you cider to your door. I'll put it in my car and I'll drive it out to you. And I think that, and I heard from a number of brewers later that and what Bearlick was doing kind of was like, oh, okay, well, we can think outside the box and do our own different things.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, Gigantic started very early as well.
Yep.
Threshold, where we are today in this lovely tap room, started doing that very early. I think one silver lining that came from staffs getting laid off was that brewery owners and managers and taproom managers and sort of the essential ownership and staff were able to really get their hands dirty, really start to work hard, just instead of trying to figure out delivery and keg schedules and what the nuts and bolts of running a business. They were actually operating the business, and they were brewing, they were getting beer into cans themselves. And then they were, the first thing was to-go beer. When everything shut down, you could still go to your tap room and buy it at a window or something. And so they had to get beer into cans. And then pretty quickly, the whole idea of, hey, well, if you're not going to come to us, we'll come to you. And then you started seeing brewery owners and delivery drivers delivering beer to your doorstep.
And who showed up at your door? Didn't even know they were coming to your house.
Tom Cook of Von Ebert Brewing. Tom, you own Von Ebert. You're kind of a big deal. You're delivering beer. Well, it's what we got to do right now, man. Yarek Shemansky. I hope I said Yarek's name right, but he delivered beer to my house. It was just amazing to see these guys just be like, we're going to do what we got to do to pay the bills and keep our business brewing.
And that's the thing, this is no longer I transitioned from the Portland Beer Podcast, the Craft Beer Podcast, and wherever I'm at, there's a brewery, and I do a podcast with them wherever I'm at in the United States or in the world. But Portland is one of those places where craft beer is precious. It is valued. It matters. And so other parts of the country, Bozeman, I've been to Bozeman twice during the pandemic year, but Bozeman has a really cool craft beer scene and local people there supported it. But particularly in Portland, lots of people just started order online. What do I need to do to keep my local brewery going? I'll go buy some beer. I'll have it delivered. I'll pick it up, whatever.
Absolutely. And I've always seen Portland breweries in sort of a mythological way.
That's a great way to put it.
There's just such an aura about them, not just here, but across the nation. People travel here to go to breweries like this, right?
Yep.
And they get here, and it's almost an awe thing where they're like, oh my God, I am at Cascade Brewing, or I am at wherever, name a brewery.
Yep.
And to see those sort of gods of the craft beer world humping and putting beer in vans and getting it out into people's hands onto their porch steps was just, I don't know how to describe it, honestly, Steven. It's like, this is such an upside down world, but it was so reassuring.
It was inspiring.
It was inspiring.
Yeah,
truly.
Yeah. It was moving and inspiring. It was to me, and it's a relief now. It's March as we're recording this, 2021, and I feel like, there may be some more people to go out of business we don't know about. Some people hold their cards close to the vest, but it was not near the disaster that I thought it was. And not only was it not near the disaster that I feared, but we've had people open open and expand during COVID.
Absolutely. Probably the one that comes to mind first is Hammer and Stitch Brewing over in Slabtown in Northwest Portland. Ben Dober, the longtime Widmer brewer.
He's a great guy and a great brewer. I love Ben.
Absolutely. He finally was able to make a dream come true. And if you haven't been over to check out Hammer and Stitch, go check that out.
Great beer and great food.
Yep. Sean Burke, who is one of the most well-respected brewers around, after being at the Commons and Von Ebert, opened Foreland Beer out in McMinnville, on the way to the coast for a lot of people, making amazing beer out there.
Yep. My friends out at Mad Cow, they've moved into a space out in Gresham. Gresham's not really loved in Portland here, but no offense to anybody out there in Gresham. But man, they made the move, and that's pretty amazing.
Yep. Mad Cow. Steeplejack Brewing is getting ready to open its place in an old Northeast Portland church on Broadway.
And so they've been planning an expansion and doing the work to expand or to grow, to start up during a pandemic.
Right. Well, the old saying about good developers, like they're the ones who spend the money and they throw down when things are bad, right? And then when things recover, they're ready to go and they're on top. And so it's been heartening to see some of these places say, all right, this is the time for us to get ready to throw open the doors when people really start to come back. Other places that have expanded as well, Upright Brewing, which has been stuck for 11 years now in a basement in the East Bank building. Left Bank. Left Bank. Yeah. That's right. I knew that was wrong. They're finally moving up to the old Stingray Cafe up on the first floor. So that's pretty exciting for Alex Canoe.
I love Alex. He's amazing. It kind of makes me sad, though, because part of the joy of going down into that basement tap room, with that real live record player, were you smart enough to find it? Because it took me a while. The first time I went there, I'm like, I know it's here. Where am I going now?
When I profiled them years ago, the whole top of my story was just the beautiful charm of that basement tap room and how you might think you were at some little place in Belgium or something, right?
Yep.
But one of the first progressions into the modern world for Upright was when they lost their cash-only model. And they put in point of service, I don't know whatever they're called. Yep. They started taking credit cards. And I remember seeing on Instagram, somebody said, "Oh man, you're killing the charm of the place." And Upright, I'm assuming Alex replied, "Charm doesn't pay the bills, friend."
I love that charm. I think that's fantastic.
Yeah. And they're also expanding. They're opening a new place out in Cully neighborhood too.
And Migration's done some expansion.
Migration has expanded twice during the pandemic. How does that happen? Like those guys, well, actually I know how that happened, but they opened up right next to Providence Park in Goose Hollow. They have a rooftop tap room overlooking the pitch, I guess is the right way to say it. If I call it the soccer field, people are going to be all over us.
Yeah, no, it's not a soccer. It's a pitch.
Yes. And then they just opened up on North Williams, which is Grains of Wrath from Camas, Washington, also opened up in the old Fifth Quadrant sidebar. So
I just recorded a podcast with Michael Hunsaker. Yep. Another follow-up. I did one when he was back in the day at... what the heck was he at?
He was at Fatheads.
Yes, Fatheads. Yep. And he did a great job there. And then I did a follow-up. I love him, and so exciting for him to be back in Portland.
Yeah.
He is a character. He's a great guy, though.
Yeah, but Migration opened up in the old Hopworks bike bar there on Williams. So there's a lot of stuff going on, actually. And Loyal Legion is expanding to Beaverton, opening up a second site. Who else is moving to Beaverton?
Oh, Beaverton.
Breakside?
Beaverton doesn't count. No, I'm just kidding.
Whoa, you're going to take some hard times for that one.
Have you driven 26 when it's a non-pandemic?
Yeah.
Yeah, come on now. All right.
But people live out there.
That's not my fault. I don't recommend it. I'm just kidding. If you live in Beaverton, I'm sure there's something good out there. I'm glad there's good Portland businesses moving out there to take care of that culinary desert.
That's right.
So Signs of Life. I think things, I've been telling people, I try to be a little more pessimistic, and always put my expectations out farther, so I'm surprised pleasantly. But I'm thinking maybe by fall, we might be back to more. I don't think we'll ever go back to life we had before, but it'll be more normal by fall, if not sooner. You think that's in the beer world? Think that's possible?
Hey, look, how much of a pressure valve do you think is out there ready to blow with people wanting to leave their houses, right? Like, I know I have one. I'm stuck in I have a nice basement and I have a nice little view out to the yard, but it's still my basement where I'm working from home every day. I'm ready to be out in a tap room somewhere having a beer with my friends, or discovering new beers. And I think there's a lot of pent up stress out there of like, I got to get out of here. I got to go do something. And I think as shots get in arms here and Oregon is sort of getting quicker about it, we're at 50% capacity now for bars and restaurants. And you drive by any place, and I'm still not somebody who's going into places yet because I don't have my shot, but you drive by places and they're pretty full with that 50%. I mean, they're not over 50. I'm not saying anybody's breaking it.
But they're at the capacity they're allowed to have.
Right. And yep. I just think that's going to continue as things open back up and more people get shots. And I think by summer, it's going to be kicking again. Yeah,
I say fall because I'd rather be wrong and it be summer than say summer be fall. But I think you might very well be right. I know because it takes a lot, like a good 6, 9, 10, 12 months of planning to pull off OBF. So OBF 2021 is not happening.
Done.
But I think my gut tells me, I'm hoping, by the way, it's two different things, but I think we might have Holiday Ale Fest this winter.
I think so.
But if Holiday Ale Fest does come back, I have a tip for everybody. If it does, buy your ticket the day it comes out, because if it comes back this fall, it will sell out immediately.
Oh, yeah.
It'll be sold out immediately.
And my tip is go Wednesday.
Yes. Yep. Wednesday or Thursday afternoon. Hey, it's a fun experience. Now, I got to ask you, if you follow the proper Holiday Ale Fest protocol, do you get a special ugly Christmas sweater?
No, sir.
Oh, come on. That's part of the fun.
I know. I'm feeling I'm going to go to the penalty box, feel 2 minutes of shame. Oh. But I don't know that I have an ugly holiday sweater.
But that's the fun. I've got like 2 or 3 of them now.
Each one of yours?
And they're craft. No, these are precious to me. I got like a craft beer themed one, and I put on a Santa hat. And you go on Saturday night with your getup on. Oh man, if you could. Hey, here's what I know you should do this year to really honor it. You go with one that has lights on it, that lights up.
There are many people who do that, so I would fit in very well.
Yeah, and it's part of the experience. It's fun now.
It is really one of the most fun festivals around. It's just, you got the Christmas tree over the see-through roof. It's warm. People are just happy. It's Christmas.
You got
and
the
other
smell
holidays.
of chestnuts
Hanukkah,
and almonds and cinnamon, and from all the, anyways, I could wax eloquent. I love that one. That's so much fun.
Yeah.
So it's been interesting that, we lost some people. Some people have come back. Some people, new places have started, I mean. What are some of the things you're looking forward to when we get back to a more normal craft beer experience here in the Portland area?
Well, my answer is twofold. One is just the regular beer connoisseur who just loves going places and trying new beers, and I just don't have the opportunity to do that anymore. The places have been closed, and I just don't have the personal comfort to be out, in public until I get my vaccination. So I miss trying beers. I miss being out meeting people. I miss doing my work, which is the second part of that answer is I miss going out and interviewing brewers and finding out what they're doing, seeing new beers they're making. And I also miss some of the plans I had in my own job, where last year I made a beer with Laboratory. It was called Fake Brews IPA. It was a lot of fun, but it was sort of an exploration of how do you make beer? Because I think a lot of people love beer and enjoy beer, but they don't really know how it works.
Yeah, you did it for the story.
I did it for the story.
That wasn't a money-making opportunity for you.
No.
You did it for the story.
Right. When I say I make a beer, it wasn't commercial. It was journalistic.
Yep.
I went in and worked with the crew there, who are great, and I wrote stories of every step of the way. We did videos, and ultimately at the end of it, we had a package that says, that beer you're drinking, here's how it gets together. And so I wanted to do more projects like that. I was starting to plan in brewery sort of live interviews with sort of well-known brewers, whether it's Jarek Szymanski or Josh Freem or Ben Edmonds or whoever I could get to come meet me at a brewery and sit in front of a crowd and just talk to them about their life, talk to them about their brewing, talk to them about their brewery, their hopes and dreams, their failures and learning experiences, and have people, 20, 25 people sit around with a beer and listening to them. And I just thought that would be a really fun way to explore the brewing industry. And I hope to do that in the future.
I would love to see that come back. That would be phenomenal. It would be fun for me to share a post about that and help promote that. Because here's what I speculate would happen. You're going to be in a brewery. You're going to have a great interview because you're a great journalist. You're going to have 25 lucky dogs being able to be there and experience it, or 20, whatever the number is. But then you got to film it or record it somehow, right? So the rest of us can check out that content.
Absolutely. I learned things from people like you, Steven. So, and we've got a great video crew at the Oregonian, Oregon Live, and all the profiles I write at breweries are always Facebook Live. We always do a Facebook Live section of them where I'll be in the brewery. We'll take a tour we did that here at Threshold, did a tour of the brewery, talk to the brewer, taste, sample beers. And so the video would definitely be a part of that whole, we would record it, put it on Oregon Live, put it on Facebook so you could watch it later for sure.
Yeah, and speaking of Threshold, when you did your end of year for 2020, year in review, one of the things you highlighted a number of, one of them you highlighted was Threshold, because they put some really cool seats outside at a time when that's just the only way people could come hang out and have a beer.
Yep. The Threshold, Jarek and Sarah were some of the first to really get their feet on the ground and not sit there and go, what do we do? What do we do? What do we do? They got to work. They built this cool pavilion out on the street where people can go sit outside at picnic tables. They started delivering beer themselves. Honestly, I don't know how Jarek did it. I mean, it's a one-man operation. He's the janitor. He buys the ingredients, he brews the beer, he puts it in cans. He and Sarah deliver it. Sarah's on social media, running the business. That kind of stuff, was talking about them because that's where we are, and they're a great example of how brewers survived all this. Building the pavilion, I think they built it themselves by hand. I don't really remember. I think that's right, though. I just can't imagine the kind of work that, and stress, work, creativity, and ultimately, I think, satisfaction to get through all of this and still say, I've got my place, I've got the future, I have a memory now, and I might have a few more gray hairs, but I'm also looking forward to where we go now.
Speaking of stress, you have a unique unique role in my head in the Portland beer world. I decided summer 2011 somehow I'm going to become a food writer. I didn't even know what that meant. And then for a while I can't be that. Now I've come full circle and hey, I write about food. I guess I'm a food writer, but I didn't.
You're right. If you're right, you're a writer.
But I had all these, these shoulds in my head. I didn't know if I should I do that? Am I good enough? But early on, I started writing about food carts. First food cart, love the people, great food. Second time, third time, the same thing. Fourth cart, food was terrible. And I didn't know what to do. And I'm like, I can't write this article. And so I said, that's it. I'm a celebratory writer. So I'm kind of like for lack of a better word, I call myself a celebratory writer, just to kind of like, if I hate it, you'll never know I was there. But I'm kind of more like, a Swiss Army knife of PR, just because I like to bang the drum for things I love. Like if someone goes to www.thecraftbeerpodcast.com, there'll be an article for this episode, and I'll have links, as you know, where people can find your content and follow you, because you're one of the people I want to celebrate. And so I consider myself, like I'm a content creator. I do not consider myself a journalist. Some of the boundaries of journalists, oh my gosh. And I definitely don't want to go to journalism school. I'm too old for that. And we have a lot in the craft beer world here in Portland. We have some amazing content creators that do a great job. Brew Public, great, where you can get information. Yeah. New School information. Beervana. Jeff Allworth, he's one of my favorite all-time writers, by the way. That dude can write. write. I mean, when he just writes about riding his dumb bicycle, he is captivating.
He's sort of the godfather of Portland beer writers, I think.
Yeah, and he literally wrote the beer Bible.
Right.
I mean, I just love Jeff. And so those are all kind of, in my head, content creators and love all that they do, but you're different and you're an actual journalist. So you work in the news business, and when the pandemic hit and we realized that we're staying shut down, what was you guys' first thoughts?
Oh, crap. Really, that was my first thought. I mean, when the economy tanks, advertising goes down, businesses close. And
advertising shuts down, and that kind of is important to newspapers.
It's kind of important to newspapers. It's not what the newsroom does, but there's another part of the building that does that, and we kind of need each other, right? And so my thought was, oh shoot, the economy is just we're gonna be in a Great Depression. I mean, I may have been a bit catastrophizing a little bit, but we all had our anxieties.
Yeah, everybody had that similar kind of journey. A lot of people, at least.
Right. And so, I was worried, but it turns out that people need news this past year in Portland. You talk about a newsy year in the nation. I think Portland's on top of the hill. The COVID hit in March. George Floyd's horrible death happened.
Tragic, awful.
Happened after that. The protests started. People were very unhappy with the status quo, understandably. And the Portland protests continued through the year. Right, almost every night. Then we had wildfires. Then we had the election that was contentious, and then we had the post-election, which was contentious, and then we had January 6th, and then we had a snowstorm. I can tell you one thing, Stephen, your news crew is tired. And so through all of that, as part of the newsroom, it's all hands on deck when there's news, right? Beer writing is important. It's important to me, and it's an amazing industry. My beer writing had to take a little bit of a step back simply to be in the newsroom, and everybody was throwing all of our energy at it, just like the brewers and the staffs were throwing all of their energy in their industry.
But you guys have come through at the Oregonian. Mm-hmm. I think local news matters, and you have local people in the newsroom that live here writing about here.
That's right.
And I really, really, really think that matters. People can go to OregonLive.com. Now, I have to confess something. I'm not the sharpest knife in the drawer. And when I was living in Minnesota in 2004, and I was going to move to Portland, it took me a while to figure out. I tried to find the Oregonian.com, and it took me a while to realize that the Oregon Live was the Oregonian's thing. And I'm like, oh, okay, now I get it. Yes. But people can go to OregonLive.com, and they can. You can still get the paper delivered. Apparently, that's legal. It's still allowed. You can get the actual paper delivered to your house.
I believe you have to be 65 or older, but yes, they will still deliver it to your house.
So that's one kind of subscription, but another kind of subscription I want to mention, just because I appreciate what local media does, is that there's been a transition where people, and all the news medias have done it, all the outlets, where people can go to Oregon Live and they can subscribe. They can become an online subscriber,
right.
And yes, they get exclusive content. But more interesting to me is they help keep, just like local people came out and supported breweries. They want to keep their breweries going. People, hey, we want to keep local news here, and that's an important thing. I'm just going to mention that as I'm not a journalist. I don't play one yet on TV. I hope I never do, actually. But as someone who appreciates actual real-life journalism and the things that you guys do, and the guys and gals that work in your world, I just really want to encourage people to consider that. Consider supporting and helping.
That means the world to me that you would mention that, Stephen. Thank you very much. I appreciate those words. It hasn't been an easy industry to be in for the last year. Longer than the last year.
It's been a tough industry for 10 or 15 years from the outside looking in. Have you guys been through a lot of transition?
Well, yes, from our culture's transition to the internet, to Craigslist, to there's been a lot of shrinkage in news, and then last 3-4 years have taken a beating just in terms of what the media means and what independent journalism is, and so that's been difficult, but we're coming through it. And, you were talking before about how you're sort of a Swiss Army knife of PR, and the world needs that too. The world needs critics who will say, this is great and this sucks. And independent journalists like myself, but we also need people out there tooting the horn for these amazing industries, and so I think there's there's a place for everything. New school beer has carved out an amazing niche for itself. Doing what it does. Jeff Allworth is, just a godlike beer author, and he writes amazing books.
Yeah, he's a treasure. He is a national treasure.
Yeah, and DJ over at Brew Public. I love reading all of them. I learn from all of them. We have different approaches and different missions,
and different boundaries. My son spent a little bit of time at the at WSU at the Morrow School of Broadcasting, and I knew these from the back of my head somewhere. It entered my head, but there's a lot of boundaries. We don't need to get them today, but journalism, you have a different set of rules.
We do,
and they're in place for a good reason. We don't need that's a whole. Maybe I'll have you on the Epic Discourse podcast. We can talk about journalism because I'd love to talk about that topic. But I think it's important, and I'm glad that there's that out there is happening.
It's there's so many threads that conversation can take. That we shouldn't get into it now. There is left to be said, though, that it's a different world now and things are changing. The influence culture, even me as an independent journalist, I have to be on social media. Not have to be. I enjoy being on social media and connecting with my readers, but also being a little bit of an advocate for I love this beer or I love that beer. That's not pure independent journalism, right? So there's some crossover. I don't make money on those kind of things, and that's sort of where the boundary is in terms of what you should and should be doing as a journalist. But there's a lot of open questions now with social media and influencer culture that we're still kind of grapple with. How far can we go and how far can't we go? It's a really interesting question.
Yeah, but I think local news matters, and I'm grateful that you guys are around and you're one of the important. I think the Oregonian is one of the important news outlets, not just for Portland but for Oregon. And then I know people across the country access your website and read it because they want to know what's going on here. Particularly, lots of people move here all the time.
It's an amazing newsroom full of incredibly talented journalists, and I appreciate that.
All right, well, Andre, it has been great to have you on the podcast. I hope we have an incredible, fun beer year, and I hope it's either this fall or as you are hoping this summer things kind of let loose, and then you have a great end of year article coming in January of 2022. I can't believe I'm even saying that, right. And that you write and that we can promote, and that I can have you back on and say what happened. What was this? Was the whatever name you give for the year that we're entering now? I look forward to that.
I suspect that next article will be a little bit more upbeat than the last one. At least I hope so.
Well, again, thank you so much for coming on the Craft Beer Podcast. I wish you all the best.
Thank you, Steven. I appreciate it. Great to be here.
Cheers.